still have to wrap their heads around this policy and how it will impact them. Good evening and welcome to It Matters. This is a show we do every evening at 5:30 p.m. on Democracy News Live. And the idea is to kind of, wrap your head around what's happening in your world today. And today we've decided to focus on the national education policy. The national education policy of 2020 is a dramatic change of the education system. Now, they started envisaging and figuring out how to push back the whole colonial system of education in India and see how they can move on to a far more progressive system. Really, the five pillars that they were hoping to address were access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. And that is what they hoped to do. They took in some 250,000 suggestions from small village level committees, and they considered over 200,000 of them. They've got over 250,000 of them. And they've been able to create a policy that they think is going to bring about tangible changes to what the education system is going to be. First of all, the biggest change is that whole 10+2 structure of school education, which has changed. So now it's 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, which means, first off, essentially brings into fold children from the age group of 3 to 6 years who were not earlier covered. The structure, when broken up into the corresponding grades, is 3 years of what they call as Anganwadi. And Anganwadi is their initial schooling system and the whole place where it's like a preschool. And plus the 2 years in a primary school, grade 1 and 2. Now, they want to take students from age 3 to 8 in a structured manner forward across the country. The preparatory stage, 8 to 11 years, grade 3 to 5. Then the middle school, the middle stage, it covers 11 to 14, grade 6 to 8. Then comes the secondary stage, covers 14 to 18 years in two phases, grades 9 and 10 in the first and grade 11 and 12 in the second. Multilingualism, learning in the native language, fair use of technology, academic bank of credit, and so on. Universalization of education from preschool to secondary level with 100% GER in school education by 2020. So I think rhetoric is great, but when it comes down to, and it works well in politics, but when it comes down to an education system, it needs people on the ground to be able to implement this. And I think that's the question we're going to ponder upon. We've decided that we will take a slice of our education system from what happens in places in the Northeast and Kashmir. We've chosen these two areas because both these areas continue to be impacted by technology, by the challenges sometimes of violence, what goes on, connectivity. One of our producers sits in Jammu and she barely has 2G right now to work with. So really, it's these challenges. Assam's been going through, obviously, was going through the amendment bill, the CAB, and then now after that the Brahmaputra, the overswelling and the floods. So I think there are challenges in front of us, and I think that's where we have to kind of look at these two regions. It's as I call it, if you want to call it the troubled states, but some people don't want to call it the troubled states, but Kashmir and the Northeast. We're going to consider it. What is it going to take to be able to get these people the same education that India is hoping to deliver to the rest of the country? Is it all right? Is it in a great shape to be able to receive this education system, or it's not? So I think that's the discussion of today. I'm going to start the show with Rohit Varma. He is right now in Guwahati. He's a professor at the Royal Global University. Rohit, welcome for the show. Now tell me, from your perspective, the NEP 2020, what is good, what's not good from your Northeast point of view, especially Assam, if you want to call it that.
Okay, thank you so much, Rohit, for giving me this opportunity to speak on Democracy News Live. First of all, let me clarify that I am an assistant professor. I am working in the Royal Global University for the last 4 years. But speaking about the Northeast, I think I'm not the right representative for the entire Northeast. Because Northeast, if you see, it comprises of areas which are so diverse in nature and diverse in people, diverse in traditions, language, and so on, that it is very, very unfair to call one single person a representative of the entire
Sure.
Northeast region.
You address the
Second,
Sam, Mr. Verma.
yeah, yeah. So, second, about the national education policy, uh, I think it's a very it has been framed with a very, very right kind of frame in mind, because the intention here is very, very nice. The first point being that now even diverse kind of skills of students will be given weightage. For example, this is particularly very, very nice for the students of the northeastern India. The students of northeastern India are very intelligent, but for lack of educational institutions, they have to go uh, in other parts of the country and abroad for higher education. And our educational system till now does not permit enough of sports based and music based skills, which will now probably be incorporated. So once these are incorporated, the students of northeast, because of their great skills in sports and music particularly, they will be at par with the other students, and hope they will be able to achieve better future.
Well, one of the things I want to
The
highlight,
second
because
point, yeah,
Professor Verma, let me structure a little bit of what you're trying to tell as well. Now, what Professor Verma is talking about is that uh, the new policy obviously lets you intermix subjects. So you could be a humanities student, but you could take medical science along with it. You could mix it, but you
yes,
have to go to college. You have to have maths as critical thinking, but you will be able to mix and match, and your all your extracurricular activities are gonna also be included in the same grade. So it's not as if you play
yes, yes,
guitar and you specialize, or you play a piano and you specialize in it and you do your master's
yes,
credit program. It won't be accounted for, and I think that's what it does. It accounts your overall performance in systems and things, and doesn't isolate one part from the other. And I think that's a very good point, Professor Verma, you made. Is what it does is it brings all knowledge at par, and not one is not better than the other, and you may require that knowledge anyways in life. So your entrepreneurial big course can be used in your medicine, and it will count as a credit. All right, Professor Verma, the second point you were making.
the second point I was trying to make is that the policy also focuses a lot on backward category students, scheduled tribes, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, hills and plains are there. So there are a lot of students in Assam belonging to those categories, and they are really disadvantageous by way of their birth in those particular areas or in particular poor families. So those kind of students are likely to benefit, even though the policy does not mention much about the kind of incentives that will be given to those students. But I hope this would be given in due course of time when the proper act is formed according to this policy.
All
The
right,
main
let me
problems that I feel, yes,
Professor Verma, let me bring
yeah,
in the others as well into the show, because they're all there as
yeah,
well.
sure,
Let
sure.
me bring in Nirmal Tanwar. She's an assistant professor. She's in Ajmer. She's been at the NCRT. Uh, Nirmal, tell me a bit about what your perspective of. First of all, let's open with the idea of NEP itself. How different is it from what was happening in the past?
In the vision of the education of India. Earlier, what we were following the colonial mindset, we have to train the people, train the mind to make them clerks only. But now there's emphasis on developing the human brain as such, because there's emphasis on the early childhood education, there's emphasis on vocational education, there's emphasis on three language formula, as we are talking of emphasis on mother language as a student or a child is very comfortable or familiar, or the term is used apnapan should be there in early education of a child. This has been emphasized from these policies, and the vision is very clear to address present day challenges. See, there's going to be a lot of see this pandemic like COVID-19. We are literally taken away by the influence of this pandemic, and it is a challenge. And we have to develop a generation where the generation is well equipped to handle the challenges of future, so that the policy in relation to these three states we are talking about, the thing is important is the first, early childhood care and education is emphasizing on activity based learning, where activities related to the local area, like whatever is prevalent in the local conditions, should be incorporated in the school system. It should not be in isolation. The study or education should not be in the isolation from the local surrounding. So it has been given weightage. And second thing, the employment thing. The teacher educator should be the local person. We should be aware of the local languages. And one thing I would like to highlight, that the policy also talked about affordable education and enrollment, inclusion. All these aspects have been taken into account. So that will be my
Now,
point.
Nirmal, may I please, you know, a lot of the policies around what should be and how it should be, for even when you talk about our law and order or,
Yeah.
implementation of GST, a lot of these policies can be written in, with an armchair. And you can actually, write a good policy. They took in a lot of suggestions. They've inculcated all of that. Now, on the ground, are the teachers, and I'm sure you are at NCRT, you've interacted with a lot of them, are they capable of delivering this visionary system? Do you think they are there yet?
See, as per the capability is concerned, the capability is surely there, but we need to have some plan, some guidance, and more training to the teachers according to the new policy, new aims we are aiming at. Certainly, the documents also talk about 50 hours of training of teachers for their new policy concern, for the new vision, new idea, activity based learning. It is there, so the things will be implemented with the time. NCRT is doing the following course by training the teacher who are already in service, providing the BA 4-year course. The NCRT has already begun with the course, and they are providing the service training to the new teachers. The teacher need to decide it at early that they want to be a teacher. It should not be like that you are drop out from the other fields and you are coming to education line. That student or a pupil teacher should be very clear that their what is their career choice. So
Right.
that's how it is
And
going
which
on.
which means good salaries, which means all of those other things which are required for a teacher to be, which means a proper process of being in the education system and not as a
Today we have
second, third.
uh, to be a teacher, the major attraction point is the salary and job security. But the vision is missing. The zeal is missing. The importance of understanding what teacher is the framer of a country's next generation. The vision is not clear. So for
Right.
making this vision clear, we have to capture the young youth as early as possible. They have to be
Right.
clear in the mind that what career they are supposed to choose. And second
Right.
thing, but we have already talked about that multidisciplinary approach. The multidisciplinary approach is required in every day-to-day life. We have categorized the subjects like to be an architecture. For example, I've given this example many times that you need to know not just your mathematical skills, your ability to analyze, your quantitative aptitude, but you need to know the geography as well. Your geography comes as an important
It's
subject.
surprising you bring up agriculture, Nirmal. A few months ago, High Court came
Architecture,
out with a ruling that you don't need an architecture to sign off on a building. Now, if you may have brought up as architecture as a great institution, and with great training, you understand mathematics, you understand some part of civil engineering, and you understand aesthetics, but the government says you don't need an architect to actually sign off on a map when you want to build, which means you've taken these architects and then have put them out of a job, and that's not the point. And I think that whole understanding that there is an end-to-end system functioning, people are certified to do certain things, is going to be a part of this whole scheme. And this architect change happened only a few months ago. So great point. Now let me bring in Naini. Naini is doing her PhD in education studies, and she's been talking about uh, what a challenge of a education system this is. Naini, first of all, tell me, when you saw this new policy, do you think this is a welcome change? We can't hear you, Naini. We can't hear you. For some reason, your audio is gone.
Now you can hear me, right?
Yes, I
Yeah.
can, Naini. Please go ahead.
So I was saying that in educational studies, and I come from the background of economics. That I've done my master's in economics, and coming into educational studies, and whenever we read the policy documents, there is obviously an interdisciplinary approach to it. You have there is economics of education, there is sociology of education, there is psychology of education. So you have any policy has lot many approaches to how it has been written out. So the policy on paper sounds very promising, that I agree to, but what I see and what I have inferred from the policies before this as well, the language, the vision that it carries looks very appealing, but how far is India going to be able to, come and this policy comes into implementation? That is a very big question. And the thing is that promises, it makes a lot of promises, but at the same time it might look awkward coming in, but every policy is written with an agenda. That's the government's agenda, how it wants to bring in a change in the education system. So for me, me going through the policy like twice or thrice, and even through the draft that came out last year, it was a 500-page draft, and we had like extensive discussions in our center, and then we got a 60 pages policy. So it has been brought down. A lot of things that were commented upon were taken into account. I agree to all of that, but I surely feel there is a large agenda to how this education policy and what they are trying to target. Especially uh, in the beginning, we talk about Northeast, and so in the policy it extensively talks about it is going to localize, it is going to bring in the local context and talk about it, but who frames what goes into the textbooks, who is going to frame? So in that context, they again appoint a national body. So there are multiple national bodies to be formed, that is mentioned clearly, like around 10 to 11 you can point it out, from curriculum to discussing who is going to frame. That comes again in the national level. You are not giving autonomy at the state level, or you mentioning SCRTs, but anyway you are the autonomy of framing what will be taught at the local level, that is not clearly mentioned. So those
Right.
lines are very clear. So
Now,
that's one
let
agenda
me
kind of.
ask you. Let me ask you from the perspective of Assam, or if you want to go slightly, wider, from the Northeast or even Kashmir's point of view. You think that this policy will have trouble being deployed in these two regions of this country?
See, certain things that the policy mentions about local context and all of these actually exist. And there is a gap what is taught back home and when you come here. So that gap has already existed, and that largely exists because we still have our social science textbooks and sciences textbooks from the state courses, which focuses already on the existing environment, on the existing cultures of the society, and students learn about that. But when they come out and join the higher education system, which is again administratively determined by how people sitting in Delhi forms the syllabus and the curriculum. So there is already a distinction. So from the Northeast perspective, I would say compared to the rest of India, we actually have more awareness of our environment and culture, given the syllabus already gives us that. But those are being continuously replaced at the ground level. So that question again, I found it contradictory when it comes to what is happening in real time and what is this policy is mentioning. This is contradictory for me. So
Right.
that's one, it's a controversial thing to point out, but it is there, it is happening, this mismatch, that you're trying to replace the local with a national idea, and then you're talking about putting in local back. For me, it's not clear how the policy is talking about this.
So let's go back to seeing if we have other people who have joined us on the frame. Can you bring everybody up on the frame so that I can address everybody? So I think all of us have to dwell on the idea and figure out that, is this policy going to be able to deliver to all of India? is this policy capable of addressing the issues that were missing in the education system before? The education system before was extremely theoretical. Obviously, the government here has had challenges with what it wanted to teach in different states, and the marriage of obviously local languages within the system, understanding each other's languages, and I think those have all been challenge areas. Now, let me go back to Rohit Varma. Rohit, what is you've obviously said it's a great policy, but tell me what is the one thing that's missing for you in this?
Yeah, before that, can I just mention some things about what Nani said?
Sure.
Yeah, so what I was telling is that there is a lot of autonomy being given to the states in this policy, particularly. The state councils of education, research, and technology (SCERTs) are to frame the local level textbooks in consultation with the national level. So local flavor is going to be there in the textbooks as well. Second point is about higher education. See, there are a lot of higher education see a lot of state universities which are being funded and run by the state governments. So state governments exercise a suitable control over these state universities and what is being taught there as well. So there is no point that this higher education is being controlled by the national level bodies as such. That is what I feel. Many may disagree, but the most important point that is lacking in this policy is number one, it's not an act, so it is not enforceable as it is. So you may write whatever you want to write here and implement none of it, which has been done in previous occasions as well. Once it
Mm.
becomes an act, we have to read the act to properly understand whether that is or not. So implement.
We've lost Mr. Verma, but let me punch in here and say, there have been some dramatic changes in it. You don't need an MPhil, for example. You can go from a master's straight from to doing a PhD. Obviously, there have been challenges in how the PhDs out of India have performed. Really, if you many times you've seen a lot of PhDs looking for jobs and they actually can't find a job because those PhDs have just not been done with a proper perspective, or they're not well rounded for that matter. So I think those are all challenge areas of the education system. The point is, are there professors capable of delivering the education that this new policy is talking about? And I think that's going to be one of our bigger challenges. There are very few good universities which actually deliver the quality of education that we talk about. And you have to remember, educational institutions are free bodies, and these bodies must have a weight, they must have freedom. And I think there has been a tangible change in the last few years. We've seen again in how there has been a control over these political, these educational institutions, which become like minor political institutions. If you see the history of all of modern India and its leaders, it has all come from university politics. So I think that whole system may come together with this education policy at some level, but at the same time, the independence must be maintained and schools must be able to thrive. So let me bring Nirmal back. Nirmal, tell me from your perspective, where do you see, India going with this policy? What are the first few changes that you would like to see for this policy to get implemented the way it's designed right now?
The focus area first should be the teachers, because they are the one who are going to implement this policy on the ground. So their training is important, their vision should be clear to the teachers, their selection procedure should be according to this vision. And secondly, the most important thing I would like to say that inclusion of vocational education. Today, India is having good youth population, but the in terms of their skill, they are lagging behind. So we need to skill them up. The idea is on the perspective on the that's, but still we have to progress a lot in this sphere. The third thing is the integration of the country. When we are talking about local and global and national integration, there are three stages. There's student, or a teacher should be able to integrate these three levels, one by following one after another. First, uh, we are seeing that the generation which is educated these days, their arithmetical skills, their how they are able to read the people in remote areas, like students in the elementary education, they are not able to read properly or do basic mathematical calculations. So these are big challenges. If you are giving them degrees, but they are not able to read or write, so it's of no use. So this
Absolutely,
challenge is
absolutely.
very basic, very minor, and it
And
is
even
going to
when they
have a
have
lasting.
education, you can do nothing with it. I have had many students, and I work very closely in rural India. I work very close to a village, and there are tremendous kids who come from there, and they're saying that we're going to school, we're studying. All those boys who go studying, they finally come back with no jobs in their hand. They're sitting there in front of you in the village. They've spent tremendous amount of money of their parents, and they still don't have the education that they would require to actually get them a job. They're back working on farms and now they're half hearted. Neither have they learned the skills of organic farming, nor do they know how to, manage cows, nor do they have
The
education in
time they
hand.
have lost, the time they are losing, their the time where they can learn a lot, even from small basic things like gardening. We are seeing this example of Japan. They are incorporating agriculture in the school system. The system is taking up one simple task, and how the process is important. The process, learning how the entire thing
Yeah.
chain runs. That understanding should be there. But the example could be anything: agriculture, gardening, or any other example can be taken up. The understanding should be there. How this process evolves, how this entire process of learning or understanding the thing is there. Learning computer or learning laptop, it's not about the equipment, but understanding goes one by one. The Bloom taxonomy, when we talk about in the education system, it talks about observation skills, like first observation, then understanding, then analytical thinking, then critical thinking. They grow eventually, and they are linked with the psychological development of a human brain. So all these can be catered with one local activity. So the teacher is the focus point, where how he or she going to implement that thing on the ground level, taking up the local available resources into the scene.
Okay. So, Naini, let me go back a bit to the Northeast with you because you're from Assam originally as well. Um, would you think that technologically, even in terms of taking this education system there, how many years is this going to take in the transition? And in this transition, what's going to happen? We saw this with the GST implementation. GST implementation took a long time. It wasn't, we couldn't achieve what we had to achieve, and we still have a fairly chaotic system with far more greater amount of money being spent on uh, you know filing your GSTs and things like that. Will this happen with the education system as well? Are these few years when these children are going to go through the system, are they going to get their lives going to get destroyed, or is this going to be a smooth transition?
I'm sure there is not going to be any smooth transition. That's like, that's not possible when in the ground level. But what needs to be acknowledged in context of Northeast is, and because it's again a personal experience, uh, when we're looking at a standardized kind of thing, we have an assumption there's a government regulation regarding everything, and all the schools are looked after the government, and the civil society is keeping an eye on how the schools are functioning. But what goes on in the Northeast is a large number of private schools. I mean, the middle income group families mostly prefer sending their kids to private schools, and then in the recent years, because of lack of good performance, a lot of public schools are being increasingly shut down by the government. So in all these private schools, and which are again termed as public but are private, you do not have, or they do not, the teachers who are employed do not fulfill all the BEd criteria, that unlike Delhi and all. In Northeast, this is not the case. They do not fulfill a lot of criteria. Mostly they are contractually hired and they're giving very low salaries. For them, incentive is to just get the students to, pass the exam, give them the answers, teach them through guidebooks, and that is how education is done. So the language English, we may be well adept, but how to use English as a medium and to develop a knowledge of the subject that you're studying, that is not happening. So in some sense, what Nirmal mentions becomes very crucial, that the teacher's role is very important. And in the Northeast, the teacher education process has, it is talked about, we have a lot more B.Ed colleges opening and there are students increasingly getting into it after doing masters. A lot of my own classmates have gotten into it. But where are they getting employed? They mostly aspire to get employed into the government schools, but in the government schools also there is large scale corruption involved and all of that. So there are a lot many things going on at the ground level, which when you sit at the center and look at it, looks very smooth, but in the reality it's very complicated as it goes by. And another thing that I would like to mention is that, see, a lot of NCRT books or even state books, state SCRT books, they already have within themselves, in the question answer part, with activities involved which are supposed to integrate. And in that case, I actually appreciate how NCRT has talked about and framed its books. There are a lot of activities already involved in how the student is to teach the how the teacher is to teach the student about the culture and what he acquires from the book, how he has to integrate it with the society that he's living in. But it doesn't happen because the lack of incentive on the teacher's part, and also the large amount of administrative role that the teacher performs instead of just the teaching role, and the autonomy to actually engage in a classroom as he or she wants. These are the things that are seriously missing out in the teacher education, the idea of teacher education that we see promoted in the country. So this is one thing that I feel, agreeing to what Nirmal says, this part also has to be considered, that not just about how the teachers, but how much autonomy and freedom are you giving the teachers, how much are they being ruled by the authorities, and how are they just supposed to meet goals. Even the formative assessments and summative assessments, because my siblings have grown up through that great system, I'm telling you. Even in the best of schools in Guwahati, it's still a culture of guidebooks, and it's a culture of giving them answers that they will reproduce in the exam and get an A+ and come out of it. So you learn the
Yes,
language, you are
I,
adept in writing, but you're
yeah.
not really learning. The system wants you to learn.
And I think that's where a lot of the challenge is going to come for the country to figure out what is the skills you need, what are the resources you need, what is the basics everybody needs as a good social citizen, and what is the knowledge base you need to progress this country. That is the kind of holistic approach that we required. I think at some level, when they sat down on the national education policy, that's what they looked at. They said, we need to take India ahead. Obviously, there was, they detested the whole colonial style of education. So they absolutely went on to a journey where they're trying to modernize it from their perspective. And I think that's where the challenge is going to come. It is a good thing that they're trying to, bring a better education system around, because the one which we had in the past, India had in the past, is failing, and failing in how. Closing statements, Professor Verma. Let's get your final word on what would you like to see first change, and where do you think there are the possibilities of going wrong?
Yeah, I earlier got disconnected. Sorry for the network issue.
No problem.
I would really like to see the policy implemented in the way it is, at least. So, what will happen is that there are a lot of positive things which are incorporated in the policy, which can be, finalized, which can be implemented. So, if this happens, then there are many good points, particularly, bringing it right from the start of the childhood till education, till the graduation and post graduation. So that is the one thing that I would like to see, and I would also like to see the center's decisions regarding how this entire policy is going to be implemented, because the implementation part is largely missing. There are some points for which implementation provisions are being mentioned, but for others these are not mentioned. So I would really like to see the central government take a key lead in formulating the implementation part of the policy. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Nirmal, closing statements from you in
I
terms
hope you
of
could hear me.
where where we should be going from here? Obviously, you've talked about, education and, focus of being on teachers and all of that. What do you think when it comes down to, the courses, and where do you start with what school level? What is the kind of education, that you need to deliver to those students? Give me a word on where do you think is going to be the biggest change that will be required and which is still not covered in this policy.
Yes, there's a long way to go, as other panelists has highlighted that how the implementation is going to take place. That is an important question. But definitely, when we talk about the policy as such, there's a breakthrough in the vision. I would say that is the key take. We have understood our problem. We have understood our cause of failure of our education system. That was a major step undertaken. So I think we are in the right direction. We need to go ahead and believe in the process.
Okay. Naini, your closing statement.
I just want it. I don't want to sound controversial, but I don't really think we are moving away from the colonial education system. It's still a continuation of what colonially we have inherited. So that part I don't want to comment on much. I think it's a continuation of the same system. But what I feel afraid as a northeastern, I would say this, that I still feel that all over all these years, given the national curriculum textbooks, we have missed out a lot. We are not part of the national syllabuses, and that's the reason we say that there are a lot of racism and all towards us. So I had hope personally that that would be taken into account, but that did not find a voice. Instead, what I could see is they're making it so much more regional that we stay located in our own regions. So I have this fear that if it gets implemented in such a way, maybe it may not get that better for us, but instead it might get worse, apart from all the other good things about vocational education. But I'm saying in the way the idea has been put forward, and how it talks more about language hegemony, or for that matter the linguistic I mean, I don't know how to exactly put it, but that's my fear regarding the policy more than anything. As a northeastern, I would say that, but as an educationist, I would agree there are good words that has been put across, and implementation of it and everything. I'm looking forward to how it goes about.
So this National Education Policy 2020, it's a good move. It's a solid move. It is at least a move from where it was, because the earlier education system seemed to be a failing. There are lots of people who succeeded in that education system as well. Let's not get that wrong. A lot of people, let's call it the creamy layer, succeeded and has done very well globally. You can find a lot of Indians, make a lot of noise and in a lot of good places. But at the same time, if you went across this country, if you see the per capita income continues to be a really, really, really low number. Obviously, there is a tremendous amount of poverty on the ground level. There's a tremendous amount of unemployment there as well, and people are stuck in places which they can never really afford to get out of. Which means there is no way for a system to exist, whether it comes to health, whether it comes to sanitation, all of that. The things were missing. One of the biggest challenges is our schools in rural India. The schools are very bad quality. They have extremely poor quality teachers delivering that education. And I think that's where the biggest challenge is going to lie. First of all, getting them to school was a challenge. Now, even if they come to school, what are they going to teach? Will they know what to teach? Are they in that system before? How many years will it take for these teachers to realize what's of value? And will we then inculcate in the syllabus the subjects that really need to be taught? For example, organic farming, maintaining a little cow herd, making sure the crops are grown right, because this is rural India and that's where you'll have to concentrate. The cities will still be able to figure out in many ways because they will still go to private schools. Then beyond that, can we bring the quality of those schools to the level of what city schools are? And I think that's where the biggest challenge lies. Thank you guys for joining us for this episode of In Matters for the National Education Policy 2020 and how it affects regions like Kashmir and Northeast and obviously the rest of India. Thank you for joining us, Nirmal, Naini, Professor Verma, and we'll be back with another episode tomorrow.